All right, environmental science. This is your presentation for land ecosystems and ecological succession, which is going to be the second part of Unit 3, even though I called it Unit 2. I wish I would have changed that. So I'm going to kind of go through this. But when we're talking about ecosystems, again, biosphere, right, all the part of the Earth that supports life, and there are specific things called biomes, which have their own unique climate, landforms, and biodiversity, which we're going to talk about. And so when we talk about biomes, we need to talk about two biotic factors, which are living things. So, for example, decomposers, producers, and consumers, and abiotic factors, which are non-living, like the soil type. So, abiotic influence of an ecosystem, the two most are average temperature precipitation. As you can see, as I said in my weekly message, I'm not going to be doing a lot with biomes, but this can just kind of show you how a biome is defined by its temperature and precipitation. So if you look at the very top, there are tropical rainforest, high temperature, lots of precipitation, and the tundra, not so much precipitation and the temperature. So the one thing you know is that as latitude of an ecosystem increases, average temperature tends to decrease. So as you move up, or as you move in terms of latitude, right, you're going to tend to see that these temperatures do decrease. So when we talk about biomes, I'm going to move my face over here because I'm cutting that off, are located near a large body of water, often have greater precipitation levels and more moderate temperatures because of the wind. So water gains and loses heat much more slowly than air. And so warmer in winter, cooler in the summers. And so evaporation fuels incoming storm systems. So the presence of mountains has a major influence on the distribution of precipitation, creating a rain shadow effect, which we're going to be doing. So as that warm, moist air travels up a mountain range, the air cools due to altitude, and then it condenses. So if you look here, there's a coastal range. This is the Sierra Nevadas out in the American West. That water goes up, that wet air goes up, drops the moisture, and it comes down. There's that rain shadow, and then you have a great basin where it's very dry. And so as a result, the windward side of mountains facing the incoming air currents receive more precipitation than the opposite, which are the leeward. So climatographs, which we're also going to do in class, is what ecologists use. It's a bar line graph that's been combined to show trends in temperature and precipitation. And so you're going to be creating 6 of these. And so this is a climatograph for British Columbia at 4 degrees north. And as you can see, precipitation and then average temperature. And so you can see the average monthly precipitation is the bar graph, which is in blue, and the temperature is the line graph in red. And then you can see that line there. So deserts have the lowest moisture levels of all ecosystems. Precipitation is infrequent and predictable. So subtropical deserts are the result of winds that heat up as they move towards the equator, and they dissipate clouds, allowing more sun exposure, and they minimize precipitation. This is the Kalahari Desert in Botswana. Rain shadow deserts are formed primarily due to their position on the leeward side of a large mountain range. So the Gobi Desert falls on the leeward side of the Himalayan mountains. So there's the Himalayas, there's the Gobi Desert. So that'd be China, Himalaya, and Tibet, and there's Mongolia. So there's the Gobi Desert there. Coastal deserts occur when ocean currents travel parallel to the coastline. They may bring fog, but no precipitation to land. So this is the western South American coast. The Atacama Desert, which is found in Chile, is probably one of the driest places on Earth, but it's formed at both parallel coastal winds and a rain shadow effect because of the Andes. Temperate deserts are in the mid-latitudes, meaning they experience some seasonal temperature variations. So this is saguaro cacti of the Sonoran Desert out in Arizona. Would be a temperate desert, and many of these temperate deserts have succulents, which are cacti. So they have really thickened, fleshy parts for storing water, and so succulents also grow very slowly. So if any cacti at home, they probably grow pretty slow. Polar deserts are located near the poles in areas where there's harsh weather that carries away the moisture. There's little precipitation, and so most of the interior of Antarctica is considered a polar desert. And this is a mummified seal carcass in Antarctica. It's a dry valley. I mean, it's a desert. Yes, there's snow there, but I don't know how they get the 250-year-old. But grasslands tend to have moderate levels of primary productivity, which is, what they're producing. And there's significant seasonal changes in temperature and precipitation. And so some typical tropical grasslands are called savannas, located near the equator, and there's a transition between forest and subtropical deserts. So this is the Serengeti National Park in Tanzania. That would be a tropical savanna. Prairies in North America are farther away from the equator, and they experience seasonal temperature drifts. So this is the Badlands National Park of South Dakota. As you can see, that is a temperate grassland. And we talk about temperate grasslands, when you talk about prairie plants, because they have adapted to cold winter and absence of precipitation by developing these crazy root systems. And so this enables prairie plants to recover quickly from drought or wildfire. So this is Missouri goldenrod, and this is compass plant. And so you can see how deep those roots are. You would probably not find, trying to think here in Ohio, we're just a little bit farther north if we would have some of these prairie plants. Maybe not. Polar grasslands, also called tundras, are below freezing most of the year, so the limiting factor is temperature. And due to short growing seasons, only the top layer so actually thaws. The rest is permanently frozen, called permafrost, and this is in Norway. So you can see underneath here, that's a tundra. There is a growing season in tundra, but it's pretty slow. It's only small plants like it can grow there. And so forest biomes have the most consistent precipitation and dominated by hardwood trees, so there's a lot of high net primary productivity. Excuse me. So the emergent layer consists of the tallest trees, which are above the others, and the canopy is the outermost layer of leaves within a group of trees, and most animal life is found in that canopy. So you have your emergent layer, you've got a canopy, you have the understory, shrub layer, and the floor, and we'll talk about canopies later. The understory consists of vegetation, the shrub layer consists of shorter plants, and the forest floor is mostly your decomposers. Tropical rainforest, which is what most of you are familiar with, receive the greatest amount of rainfall of any other biome. There are a few abiotic limiting factors there, but the nutrient cycle occurs very rapidly because of that high temperature and moisture. Allows those producers and consumers to work pretty fast. And so this is at the border of Brazil, Argentina, and Bolivia. Iguacu Falls. I know I'm mispronouncing that, but temperate forests receive a comparable amount of precipitation, but are in higher latitudes. So, like in the northern Pacific coast, the U.S. and Canada has two geographic advantages. One, they're located on the windward side of the Olympic mountain range and receives consistent moisture. So that's why we have some of those amazing forests on the West Coast. Deciduous forests, which you're probably most familiar with, experience winter that reaches below freezing and intense dry season. And so like rainforests, these mostly contain broadleafs. So here's white oak, Quercus alba. That's an example of a broadleaf. And this is a Norway spruce, excuse me. And so I've got some of these examples of these leaves. We may see them. And so the leaves of broadleafs lose moisture rapidly through transpiration. So they'll shed their leaves in the winter. So this is in one of the ranges down in Australia. Boreal forests, also called taiga, have coniferous trees, which are much more well adapted, needle-shaped leaves and cone-shaped leaves, or cone shape of the trees. So, in the Mediterranean biomes are forest and scrublands with highly seasonal precipitation. Nearly all precipitation occurs in the winter months, and the summers are completely dry. And so, in Arizona, we have like a Mediterranean biome. And then island biogeography, which we're going to talk about. Islands are subcontinental land masses surrounded by water. Isolates them from the mainland, and so they include natural areas surrounded by human development, desert oasis, etc. And they have their own unique niche and biodiversity, and so this is South Island, New Zealand. And so two variables that heavily influence the species richness or biodiversity of an island is the size and the distance it is from the mainland. As the distance from the mainland increases, species richness decreases, and as the island increases in species richness, it tends to increase as well. So urban ecosystems, which you're probably more familiar with, are natural ones that have been converted from human development and tend to have few characteristics in common. So in an urban ecosystem, there's a high degree of habitat fragmentation due to construction, and there's a lot of boundaries or edge habitats here. So here's a habitat, and then you made a road right through the middle. And as you can see how it limited some of the movement of some of the animals. Also, when we talk about urban environments, we do have to talk about light noise pollution, which can disorient many organisms, especially along the coast. Often you'll see where they'll say, you cannot have certain lights on at night, especially during turtle season, like when they're breeding. And so introduction of heavy amounts of air and water pollution have led to this urban heat island effect, and cities tend to be warmer due to heat absorbing properties of the buildings. And so if you look at this profile, downtown of this metropolitan area, you can see that late afternoon, it's much warmer in the city than it is out in the farmland. And so urban habitats also tend to be dominated by generalist species that can survive across a wide range. Few specialists are they're highly adapted for certain niches. And so these generalists can live pretty much anywhere. And there's also a higher likelihood of introduced or non-native species can develop with humans. So we're kind of at fault there. So we're talking about species. When you talk about biodiversity hotspots, and these are areas with large number of species that are endemic, which means that they're found there. And so there's 36 identified hotspots, account for about 2.4% of the Earth's, I can't see my word there, land, surface, but nearly half its identified species. So you can see where these biodiversity hotspots are. South America, you got North America, parts of Africa, into the Mediterranean basin, there's quite a few. And then if you get out into like Indo-Burma and Southeast Asia. So let's talk about what happens when humans impact an environment. We have ecosystems in transition. That's called succession. Biomes are dynamic and they change as the earth changes. This is a process called succession. And so ecosystem succession takes two forms depending on the starting point. Primary is when a new ecosystem develops where there was none before. So if we got primary succession, you got bare rock. So the key is there's no soil. There's no soil, and then you can lead to pioneer species, intermediate, and then a climax community. Early stages of primary succession is weathering, and so by breaking down the wind and dissolving the rock, you add materials to the soil that can allow for these pioneer species to take over, and it tends to be the lichens and mosses or the pioneer species because they're the first ones that appear. Middle stages are intermediate, like grasses, wildflowers, and these tend to be carried by wind and animals. They grow quickly, and these tend to be generalists. And then we get late stage, which is a climax community. This is tend to be niche specialists. So if you think of a redwood forest, they grow slow, they have long lifespans, and they continue to dominate the ecosystem until another disruption occurs, like a forest fire. And then secondary section follows the disruption of the existing ecosystem. Fire, flood, volcanic eruption, clear cutting, these are all examples of secondary succession, but the key is for pioneer or primary succession, no soil. Secondary succession occurs when there is soil. And so, for example, Mount St. Helens. So I wanted to keep that to about 12 minutes, so I did. Again, this will be the next week, week and a half, and then we'll be wrapping up Unit 3. So again, hope you found this helpful. I don't know if you're watching or not, but it is what it is. So again, this is me signing off from 102. Have a good week, and I will see you when I see you.